item on the agenda, which is item 5E, adoption of a resolution approving a new policy on district financial reserves. I read it and I didn't quite capture it.
Yes, I didn't quite get it either.
So what are we doing?
Well, you're establishing a set of reserves that ultimately, when we, for example, let's just start with the first reserve item, the capital facility replacement reserve. Okay, when I say water and administration, there are certain things within our administrative office. We've got capital fixture, we have the building. What else do we have in administration that are major capital facilities? They have a useful life. They will be, they need to be replaced in the future. This is, in reality, this is your depreciation money. This is having a reserve that specifically is an amount of money that is based on studies that we do, that we say, here, if we're going to do all of this right and not put a burden on future generations, here's the amount of money we would need. Okay. And how much can we afford each year? And in reality, once you do that, that doesn't mean that future boards can't take it away or eliminate it or whatever, but when you establish reserves, they fall under very strict guidelines under the code. You lose some flexibility, let's put it that way. But you gain accountability because you're taking action to specifically say you're going to set this money aside for these purposes. And again, I want to let you know, as far as timeline, we're not up against a time crunch. If you want to have a little bit of time to absorb it, I'm not recommending you wait just for the purpose of waiting, but this is it's a substantial step in making a statement to the public that we understand our infrastructure, we understand our issues, and we're going to establish reserves, and we're going to account for certain activities and make sure that we have enough money to be able to deal with them when the time comes.
Ken, to me, I like to see, I've worked through the budget numerous times. But what I'd like to see is, in our reserve, what kind of money are we talking about? Where does this fit into the budget, the accounting process? I would feel more comfortable. I like numbers. Words are great, but I like,
Well, the words give you the structure and the process to guide management in the way that those numbers show up in the budget. And also the way that, these will be accounted for separately in the financial statements.
That's what I'd like to. Can you give us a draft financial statement of what this would look like?
I just pull it from another district that has designated reserves and show you the way that it's done. I mean, it would just identify them separately. It wouldn't, and there's things like the use of the funds, when we have the annual audit, if we were taking in, capital facility improvement fees, and we were spending those on broken something else, you're likely going to have your auditor saying that's an inappropriate use of that reserve fund that was dedicated specifically for expansion activities. Let me just get through real quick, if you don't mind, just going over the headings. The capital facility improvement fee, specifically improvement, orderly and timely expansion of district facilities. That doesn't mean that we're going to automatically expand it for future demand arbitrarily just because we want to spend the public's money on it. In reality, this is where we're going to be investing. When you look at the funding for it, on the top of page 115, annual contributions from connection fees. Okay, the capacity portion, not the physical cost of digging up and putting in a service line or any of that, putting a meter in. That's different. This is, we have capacity in the system. We have capacity in each of the tanks. We have capacity in the pump. It's got a value. New connections to the system pay that down. We can pay that back so that we've got money to put back in to purchase new pumps. It's also required under, this references AB 1600, but it's 66,000, the government code. It has a specific requirement that you do, that you account for capacity fees in a certain way. And so that's where connection fees would go. Not that we have any connections at all, but when we get a connection fee, we are required by law to put that in a certain fund, and it does not fund our operation.
And
it's
today
supposed to go in.
Today we're not in compliance.
We're not putting it in. We can put it in the same bank account. We've just got to account for it separately.
Are we accounting for it?
No, we're not separately accounting for it. But, you know, again, if we were seeing a huge amount of growth, that would be a concern, and we need to get this, we need to get it on track. We need to get the reporting and all of that on track to make sure that we're in compliance. The water supply contingency reserve, again, I'm not saying we're going to go out and do 50 more wells, but we need to do an evaluation to make sure, and that this comes up in our discussions and public comment. What are you doing with those wells? How's that all work? Well, we need to know what are our existing customers today inside where they can be served McClure water. What do they need? What is that demand outside the place of use but within the district boundaries? And then how's that translate if somebody comes in and requests an annexation? And the only way that they can develop is to annex and connect. How many wells do they need to develop as a backup supply? So that's the contingency reserve. Is if we're not going to immediately put in a well, and somebody's coming in and doing 12 parcels or something like that, they're either going to be required to put in a well to serve the demand, the non-McClure demand at their expense to our standards. Okay, this doesn't address standards, but that's another district policy we'll need. We set the standard. We require that the new development project build it to our standards so that it doesn't, so it's not a cheapskate piece of equipment. And the reserve fund here on the supply side is to make sure that there's a buffer, because I've seen in other communities where there's no buffer, and pretty soon you've sold all you've done is sell out your existing connections, and you're up against the wall, and the availability fee it has to be taken into consideration in that, because that's to set aside infrastructure and water. Capital improvement connection reserve and rate stabilization reserve, I think, was and operating fund reserve. So in other words, operating fund is pretty much what we have now. We have a second account that we have. We maintain it at a level. We move money to the account where we pay all of our bills. We move it back and forth.
How do you determine how you're going to set aside the amount of money? I mean, for each item, how do you determine the amount to be set aside?
That's up to board policy based on the need. So you've got, give me an example of what use. For capital replacement, you'll have the capital improvement plan that the district engineer is going to certify, that says we've got so many pumps, we've got so many pipes, we've got so many of this and that we've got to replace over time. There's a number. We've got a physical plant number that we have that we depreciate. So they'll look at, what's the capital improvement doesn't mean that you're building in capacity. It just means that you're replacing equipment that's separated out. And look at that compared to what you're depreciating, and then you come up with a number that makes you comfortable that you're able to set aside comfortably to make sure that you always have money in place to do some of this advanced work. Like getting the projects ready to shovel ready, and in many cases, the cheapest way to build things is to build it out of pocket. In some cases, the money is so cheap that it's easier to get it ready and build it with a loan or to bond it.
My only comment was, this seems like an ideal candidate to be a committee instead of a board, to flesh it out.
Just have a conversation like that. It was it's something that wanted to get out there and get in front of the board. It's a very complicated topic, and it's a very important action, and we want to make sure that we can explain exactly what it is and exactly why it's there, and what we're going to do with it.
It's a fabulous idea. We really need to do it. You know, you can't just take all this money and stick it in wages all the time. It needs to be separated out and where the money's going to go. And if we need a motion, I'll make it. But unless we're still
What is the rate implications of this? What does it
We
do?
don't know, because we don't have the capital improvement program done, we don't have the growth study, we don't have the water supply study. Those are things that, in order to get to set the amount of money, we've got some engineering to do. But if we don't do it, what happens is you get backed up against a time where somebody comes in and submits an application, and you can't provide service at all, no matter how good the project
Sounds
is and how
like
much.
we should be
You know.
doing that. We should have been doing it right along.
Well, like when you're charging connection fees, how do you know what your connection fee is going to be if you don't know how much it's going to cost to be able to serve each new unit? You know, so we've had some cost estimates done in the past on putting in more pumps and pipes and a second tank, but now, things have changed. You don't need the second
We're
tank.
doing depreciation on some of these items, but that depreciation is winding up in the general fund. I mean, it's not really being categorized into a particular fund. Save that.
TUD just went through that argument. I saw that. I watched that evolve a little bit on whether you actually set aside depreciation or whether you use it.
Right.
In a government sense,
It should
most
be set aside.
utilities are using it. But they'll show. Here's $100,000 of depreciation. Here's $100,000 of capital expense. You know what I mean? You're showing the line between it. That's the same thing you're doing here. You may not use your entire depreciation. You may say the depreciation only covers 50% of what our estimated real cost is, because it's a straight line depreciation. So you may say we're going to spend 50% of our depreciation, and we're going to put 50% of it in reserve account. We've got some to set those numbers. It may take some. It's definitely going to take some studies.
So when's it going to be done?
Well,
Yes.
Push. It says it's got to be developed. Who's in a position to develop this proposal or recommendation? Who would do that for us?
You mean
To determine
the total amounts?
Yeah, who's going to determine what type of amounts? I mean, I'm struggling because I'm looking at this. I think it's a great idea. I think it's something, as Dan said, we should have had for a long time. But there's a cost factor associated with this,
right.
And to me, we only have so much money. And I mean, I like the idea, but I'd say we have reserves in it. We've kind of jumped on you because we don't have reserves for capital projects or whatever. And now we're saying we need it done, but how much is it going to cost to get us to this position?
I mean, that'll take a little bit of time to work out.
So
it's going to take another
so-
year to get through for example, the capital improvement, the facility replacement program.
So
It's going to take us at least a few more months to have an idea of what that number is.
Okay.
We know what our depreciation number is, but to know what that engineering number is to actually replace it, that's going to be a couple months out in reality. And then, but this doesn't set the maximum. The target balance, it recognizes that it fluctuates. And the current target reserve balance is the amount that should be funded at the end of each fiscal year according to the replacement reserve study and capital improvement plan. Okay, so that is typically done by a contract with a financial firm such as MBS or Willdan